Today I'm going to show you all the tips and tricks to putting together your own urban suburban garden. This one is 5 feet wide by 15 feet long. Interested? Here we go. A couple things starting out is this is 15 years worth of gardening right here. Every year we put the compost that we've collected from the previous year on top. You can see there's a lot of peanuts. I try to crush them up a little bit. I don't know why, but the worms love peanut shells. We eat a lot of peanuts. They slowly break up and they're great for compost. We can use this landscaping fabric for 2 to 3 years because we use the same pattern. We don't have to worry about taking too much out of the soil, even though we're using the same location, because we turn this all over. We add new organics to the holes to supplement. And this is our tomato and basil garden. Here we've laid out all the cages that we're planning on using. I've already done some repairs on it. We use conduit pipe right here for the stakes. Some wooden stakes, but they don't last very well, so the conduit pipe lasts forever. And then this is just wire frame, 2 inches by 4 inches on the grid. And just bend it over, and we make somewhere around 20 to 24 inch cages, and that works out well. That's a super sweet cherry tomato. Roma, 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 Roma. We make a lot of paste and sauce kind of things. This is a early girl. That's a Cherokee purple. That's a big boy. That is a black cherry. Here's another super sweet and a grape tomato. We buy plants because it's just a lot easier to get the variety that we like, and starting plants just hasn't really worked out for us. Now you'll sometimes get plants that have 2 and you'll have a tendency to want to split those. Probably a 50-50 chance of survival. In other words, you might damage both plants by trying to split them, because at this point all the roots are intermingled and you're going to rip some out and potentially damage the plants. I like to do the planting in the late afternoon, early evening, and the reason why is because the temperatures are cooler, and I also like to do it a little bit in the shade. If you're using landscaping fabric and you haven't made the cross, you would make the cross after you figure out where your plant's going to go. I lay the plant down. I've got a bucket, and I'm going to dig down into the soil in a hole twice as big as the pot size. I'll pop this out of the plastic container and I put it down in there as far as it will go, and try to orient the plant for the sun. Now the sun in this part of my yard goes like this all day long, so we're going to get some good sun for these tomatoes. Then I've just got a great fresh bag of garden soil, and I'm just supplementing the hole with 4 or 5 scoops of that. I'm pressing down just enough to make it firm and there's no air pockets. And then I take the garden soil from my garden and I top it off. And it says many years of composting plus the fresh composting that we did when we turned over the garden before we started planting. And make a mound. It's okay if it's a little high because it will settle down a little bit. Then I clean off the marker and I'll put it right in there like that, and then just bring this to protect the plant from weeds as best as I can. Take these bamboo skewers. They're for toasting marshmallows. 12 count, 32 inches long. For under $1. You can't get that in any garden store. And then I have this rubber coated wire. I'll post down below, and I really like this combination. So what I do is I get 2 skewers, and you can see they only have pointed ends because they're for toasting marshmallows, and a 10-inch to 12-inch long piece of the rubber coated wire that you can reuse. Put these in the ground. Try to follow the seam. Push them down maybe a foot or more into the soil. And the reason why I do this is because I was finding that when I put my cages over the plant just kind of flops back and forth. We're going to start this plant out in a good way by staking it out from the bottom. Here's another example of what you can do, and you can slide it up, slide it down. Really an interesting system in order to strengthen the plant. It's very pliable. I really like this wire. Again, we'll post it down below where you can get some yourself. And by the time it gets up to here, which is a little, probably 28 inches, it will probably be good enough to hold itself up with the cages. Now that all the plants have been initially staked, we're gonna give them a nice dose of water. And then we'll put the bigger cages on top of these. It's the next day, so you can see that I've got all the cages in place except for one. This is where my plant for this position was previously. Then I found out that it ran into an irrigation line and we clipped it last year. So I had to move the hole over, which means I need to cut some more landscaping fabric if I don't want to have weeds growing up in this area right here. So there's the fountain head. I've got a video on how I repaired the line here. If you're interested, I'll post it up here. Here is my project bucket that I use all the time now with a nice kneeling pad. I'll post that up of too if you're interested. Another thing we're going to try this year is all of these are $3 to $4 plants. And I wanted a Cherokee purple, but they didn't have any of the $3 plants. So I had to get a $7. So here's a $3 plant, here's a $7 plant. See, it's a lot stockier further along. So we'll see how that does under very similar conditions. So this is the guy we're gonna plant here. You can see some weeds growing up in here. This is what the landscaping fabric does. It prevents those from happening. So since I'm moving the hole, I need to get a new piece of landscaping fabric, and I'll pull those weeds. I'm just going to lay it in here initially and then put all these others on top, but I still have to make the hole for the irrigation system. Just across, if you hadn't had landscaping fabric down before, this is exactly what you would do. Just cut a hole. With this bigger plant, I'm just going to follow the same approach as before. That will come off in the water. Now I'll just fill it up, stake it with the wooden stakes, and then I'll show you how I put a cage on. Let's talk about these cages. They come in 3 or 4 foot sections and I've just wired them together. I know it seems tall, but I like tall plants, and I found if you give them the space to go up, you'll get a lot more fruit. I know that's debatable, but that's just what I found. And then you can cut little access points here in the cages so you can reach in and get the tomatoes or whatever. To keep them in place, I do 2 things. I use this conduit pipe because it's indestructible. I take a hammer and just kind of shape it down, and I use 2 or 3 of those, preferably a little longer than this, probably around 4 or 5 feet. So you take a 10-foot conduit, cut it in half. These are 3 or 4 feet, so try to get 3 instead of 2 out of conduit. If you use 3 of these around the plant, like, it works out pretty good. Figure out what side is up, you put it over the plant. You might have to bend the cage a little bit if you got a slope like I do. And once you get the first one in, it's a lot easier, unless you have an assistant, which I don't have today. You might want to wear leather gloves if you're a little nervous about hitting your hand. Pull it out a little bit. So that's pretty good. I'll use some cable ties sometimes against the cage to even give it a little bit more strength, and then I'm gonna do the twine next, but between the twine, stakes on the bottom, you've got the top secure, the bottom secure, and a great method to maximize your vegetable garden production. Here's the garden level, ground level view of the connectors. You would like at least 2, but ideally 3 or 4 connections to the grid. And here's the grid from the deck looking down on the garden. It's kind of crazy, but it really works well. The last thing we need to do on this low maintenance garden is plant the basil. Now you can see that in this case we are going to split the plants from the pots, and there's 3 healthy basil plants there. This was a little more expensive. This is Everleaf Emerald Tower. We haven't tried that before. Usually we do elephant basil. They're really big leaves, but we couldn't find that this year. And this is just generic sweet basil. We already have cuts in the landscaping fabric for this, and we're gonna follow the same pattern as we did for the tomatoes. Make a hole, take the plant, put it inside, give it a good watering. And we're gonna do this in the late afternoon / in the shade so the sun doesn't beat down and pummel the plants before they have a chance to establish themselves. And using a stick, you use a chopstick, pencil, whatever you got, I'm going to patiently divide into 3 subplants. I mean, you could rip at it and do it, and that's what I've done in the past, but just trying to salvage as much of the root system for each plant as possible. Give it the best fighting chance we can. Put in some extra material if you want, push down and put all that nice compost in place. And then we're gonna do that all the way down. The only thing left to do is go to the base of the plant and give every one of them a nice little douse from the rain barrel. Or the dehumidifier, whichever one you happen to have. The initial investment on the cages and the stakes, it could be about $50, $70 or more depending on the size of your garden. But these guys have been around for about 14 years and they're still going strong. Probably have another good 10 years coming out of the cages that we've made and the stakes and things like that. I don't like to buy things again and again and again. So what do you think? Easy? Hard? Are you going to make one your own? Do you already have a garden? Please post comments below. Always interested to start a conversation. If you're interested in gardening, home repairs, designs of all kinds, making and breaking things, I even do a little bit of costume, props, and cosplay. Check out my channel and please subscribe, because you never know what you're gonna see. So stay tuned for future videos where we watch this garden grow and do great things.